Nice to see you all again here. This time I will not do the presentation round for you guys, but I will try to. You will see me in a slightly younger version on the screen. My name is Sari Rannanpaa. I have a difficult name. I'm from Finland. I live in Finland at the moment. I am an evaluator. I have been working before at the European Commission as well as at the Finnish Ministry of Agriculture, but from the 2013 onwards I've been working on the private sector. And I work especially in regional development, rural development. At the moment also somehow I ended up working in fisheries. Things happen. And also one of my latest projects was the digitalization of education. And I've also worked on Erasmus Plus evaluation. So it depends, as an evaluator you have to be kind of a jack of all trades. But I do realize that it's nicest to work on the sector where you actually know what you're talking about. But the same concepts and the same methods can be used for all kinds of things. Yes. And my background actually is in political science, political economy, international relations. And as you can see soon from my CV, I have also, my latest degree is from Central European University when it was still based in Budapest. Oops. And but I've studied in London for 4 years. Yeah, but now they are in Vienna. They have a fantastic campus in Vienna, to be very honest, and my former professors are very happy there. And for the past 5 years or so, I was actually teaching evaluation at the university in Iceland, which was really good fun. But the course is going on at the moment. I passed it on to a friend of mine. Who thinks that it's a really good fun. It's like a basis of evaluation. But my approach to evaluation is quite practical because I have learned evaluation in practice and I'm a consultant. So I always think about the resources because I have a company now, we are 2 people, and we should be able to feed our children. In the end, evaluation is great and I really like it, but it's different when you have to think about what you would want to do and then think about what you actually can do with the amount of money and time you have. Quite often it's a compromise between actually more time than resources. Sometimes it's also resources. So as a consultant, sometimes I even have to make decisions that, okay, this time we will not even leave a bid because it will just not make sense. That when the client wants 1 year worth of work for the amount of money of 3 months and in a schedule of 4 months, and then you just see that there's no way that we would ever make it, then you're just like, okay, maybe somebody else will be braver. And let's do this. Anyway, yes, good. Okay, we'll try. If not, then I will just go and tap the thing all the time. I was teaching last year in Belgrade about participatory methods. A lot of work that I do involves participatory methods because I think that I very strongly believe that evaluation is something that people should learn from and not just, we go there and we tell them in a very judgmental way that you guys are wrong, this was bad, and you should do something about it. That's not the way, because I think it's something that, you as an external person, you come in, you try to understand the system, how it works, and then you try to come up with something better. But in order for your work to be meaningful, you also need to have your recommendations should be such that they can be implemented. Of course, every time you say more money, more resources, yes, this is always a good recommendation. But especially for systemic changes, it's important to think about which, what are the very important things that, a bit like with kids, that choose your battles. That, don't, of course you can go all overboard with the recommendations, but it's better for everybody if they can be recommended, or like if they can be used. But at the same time, I do very strongly believe in the evaluator ethics. So I would not change my recommendation if the client doesn't like it. That's if this is what the data says, that's what it is. But if it's something that they can't do anything about, then you can mention it, but that's not going to be your major recommendation. But yeah, so I think participatory methods are important, as well as evaluation capacity building. I like educating, especially clients. I think it's really good to also train, for example, the ministries, or I work a lot with local development people, and I work a lot, like building their capacity so that they can, for example, especially the ministries, that they can order better evaluations, and that they are more aware of what they are going to order, and they know they also know what they would do with it, rather than just say that, well, it's an EU requirement, so we'll just do it and then we forget it. Okay, let's get to business. Results chain. I'm continuing where Mariana left from. Well, no, not me again. No. This is very moody. So, so let's try. Let's try this.
Yeah, this is working. Right here. No.
No?
Then I should put it out. And
Yeah.
it's working.
Okay, good. I think a lot of you might have seen the results chain. This is a bit like a logic model, but what I like about this is that it's quite clear, and it helps to simplify the things. Some people say that the results chain, that it simplifies things too much, and that it's ridiculous, and life is not linear. So yeah, that is true. But when you're starting to when you get a new assignment or you look at the new policy, you are trying to understand that how does it work? How is it supposed to produce results? I think, at least for me personally, it helps to summarize it and to organize it. So yeah, the results chain, it is. It makes I like it also because in the logic model, the assumptions are not usually included, but in this one they are, and you will see here. So this is also, I think, the thing that Mariana wanted you guys to do, but here you will see that the results chain, this is slightly different in a way that we have immediate and intermediate and ultimate outcomes. Some people call these are results, and ultimate outcomes are impacts. But basically starts with inputs or means, so whatever resources you need. Then these are the activities. The outputs are the concrete results of the activities. So for example, here we would have, let's say we have 50,000 euros. We organize a cost action training school, and the output is that we are 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 10, 11, I think we're supposed to be people trained. And outputs can also be, cups of coffee drank during the training or something, anything you can count. Number of PowerPoint slides presented. But then this is the interesting thing is that, this is the part that the implementing organization is doing. So, for example, HEDFA is organizing the facilities, and we are doing the training. So this is the part we can control. And then comes the interesting part, which is the change. And this part we can't control anymore. So change in the target group at the end of the program. So you guys are the ones who should have immediate outcomes. So after you have finished this, finished the training, then you should have, let's say, increased knowledge about the theoretical or like theory of change and some evaluation methods. And in a couple of years, we will start seeing, especially I remember there were lots of people from Georgia here, so we should see an increase in the theory-based evaluations in Georgia. Yes. That's exactly what we wanted to see in 2 to 3 years. And then ultimate outcomes, so the impact will be then on the societal level. So it might be that Georgia will become the leading country in theory-based evaluation later. So we will see. Yeah. But so this is I like the way that it breaks down the things. But then we have the management assumptions. So these are simple. For example, that one of the things is that we have chosen the right students, that we have enough Georgians here in order for the intended change to happen. And the implementation assumptions is that, for example, that my inputs my presentation is good enough so that you can learn from it, and that you guys stay awake and things like that. And then the development assumptions, they are related to how you are going to be using the things that you learn. That if, let's say that one of the assumptions would be that you stay within the field of evaluation. And then sustainability, how long are you able to be interested in theory-based evaluations? You can come up with these kinds of things. I like doing this. I think I've done this quite many times, and I've learned. I've been doing this, so I like improvising things and thinking that how can you break down normal things into the result chain. This is actually this is an example that I have made for my for the course in Iceland. But I wanted to show you this because I think this as a result chain, I think this is pretty all right. But this is completely out of my own head. So the Fragile Communities program in Iceland is it's a program that funds local development in some communities that are considered extremely fragile. So basically people are moving out and jobs are being lost and everything. And then I imagined that they would have like local grants for startups. So this is how the result model would look like, or the theory of change basically. And we start from here, so that there are the local grants for business ideas or startups. That the assumption is that they lead to new businesses or startups outside agriculture and fisheries. That this is what the grants should produce. I don't have the inputs here. And you should read it like this way. Because here, the assumptions are the ones that should always hold true so that the next step can happen. Because if the assumption doesn't hold true, then this doesn't happen. So in order for the startups to create new local products or services and employ the entrepreneur, I mean, this is quite an ambitious thing, then the grants should first of all lead to establishment of a company locally and not, let's say, in the capital, and also produce goods and services locally. Also, the startup should survive the initial startup phase. At least in Finland, 50% of startups die within 3 years. So in order for us to get to the outcomes, all of these should actually hold true. Then we have the risks. As in entrepreneurship, the biggest risk is the entrepreneur. If something happens to him or her, that's it. Skills, resources, viability of the business plan, lack of demand of services or products. It's quite nice risks, but yeah. So the idea is that you read it this way. So in order for the intermediate outcomes, which is that the successful startups provide new or improved local products or services, and they create job opportunities in the rural areas so that they not only employ the entrepreneur, but other people, then what they produce should be interesting for customers and be competitive in the market. And then for the ultimate outcomes to turn out is that the local economy is diversified away from agriculture and fisheries, and that the local economy grows. I mean, this is quite heavy if you think about this single entrepreneur who just wanted to do something. Then the assumption is that the startup company will become a significant employer and economic entity locally, which is a big assumption again, and that the general economic and demographic situation supports economic growth. I mean, if there's a recession, everybody is leaving, it doesn't matter if your company is growing because it will not make a difference. But this is quite a typical, I would say, example of these kind of startup grants or business startups. I have seen so many of these programs where they just want, the main aim is to diversify the economy and to create jobs. But then when you start looking at all of the assumptions and the risks, then it's like, oh dear, if they actually succeed in this is great. But yeah, so if you only look at this side of the story, it looks like, okay, yes, that makes sense. This is very good. But then when you look at the assumptions and the risks, then it's like, oh, this is not so easy. And so basically, this is an imagined theory of how the startup aid should work. But if this was the case, then we could be in a theory-based evaluation. We would first make this thing, theory of change, and then we would start gathering information both about this side as well as that side, and then see how well did they work. And then in the other way of looking at this, that was the theory of change, and this is now then again the results chain. So as you can see, we have similar assumptions. The results chain, it goes the way like the left-hand side did, and then the implementation assumptions are what was on the right-hand side. What I want to show with this is that I think some people get surprised when you change the presentation from horizontal to vertical. First of all, and the other thing is that there are very many ways of presenting this. You can also do boxes with loops and all kinds of things, but the basic idea is the same. Yeah, you had a question.
Actually, yes, kind of question. So, like, how we can make better development of the risks and assumptions? Because, like, for example, speaking my experience, like, realistically, sometimes risks are, like, very general risks, and it makes me to feel that these are not really lines that could really linked with even the outputs or outcomes and, like, realistically speaking, how we can convince the ones who are holding the resources that really make the efforts to think about that investing in identifying the risks and assumptions, or it's not that important. I don't know. That's kind of the question that I
Yeah.
had.
I think quite often in the policy documents that I see, they don't show assumptions at all.
Yeah. Okay.
They don't show risks at all, or they might mention them, a bit somewhere, but not really. So how you can make better ones? Well, your imagination. Well, I will come to this, but I will answer your question. So the way that we usually do this is that we go through the documents, and there you can get this is the official story. Let's say the top line. This is the official story you get in the documents in the program. Sometimes there is a kind of a description of how they expect things to do, or like how they expect things to happen. You can include some of them here. But then we also use interviews, and we go in and we actually sit with the client or like different people and then say like, okay, so when you fund a business startup, like, what's the idea? How was it going to produce the new local services? Like, what was your idea? How was the change going to happen? And you talk to a few people, then you might get an idea. Then the same with the risks. But sometimes we also do it that way, that we evaluators, we come up with them. And then we go to the client and say that, okay, this is what we think you thought, and is this correct? Usually I find that if we go with an empty template, that we don't have any assumptions here, it's very hard. And the clients, they will, in a workshop, they would not say anything. But if they have a ready model that they can criticize, that's always better. They work better when they say like, oh, this is not true. Like, why is this here? This doesn't make sense. It's like, okay, if it doesn't make sense, then what would? Like, what did you think? So we do it two ways, but of course we try to be true to the program, because that's what we are evaluating. It's not like, I don't want to evaluate my idea of the program. I want to evaluate the idea of the program as the people who wrote it had it, how it should work. So that's the idea. So we need to before we get to actually work, we need to already engage the client. And this is hard because the clients some clients are used to not being engaged in the beginning. They are like, well, you guys are going to go and do research and come back when you have something to say. And then we're like, no, we would like to talk to you about the theory of change. And then, what is that? So it's this is a different way of doing it, and that's why I'm saying that teaching the client is also important, because if they are used to these econometric models, first of all, they want to know how much, what was the change in euros or in quantities. Then they are also expecting to be just providing a lot of data. But I mean, you don't usually discuss the econometric model with the client. There might be some people who do this, who are able to do this with the ministry officials, but this is not my experience with the steering groups. But this is how you would actually engage them. This was just a little prelude, because now we're going to the evaluation approaches. And in order to not be too categorical, I have to say that, well, the approaches are the ways to think about, design, and conduct evaluations. And they they mean different things when you make different choices. But in the research, there is no commonly agreed classification. I have found at least 5 or 6. My MA students last year, they were so frustrated because they were saying that, but why is it so messy? It's like, well, because it is, and there isn't an ISO 900 classification of the evaluation methods and tools, but different people think different things. So these are examples. There's the impact evaluation, process evaluation, formative evaluation, development, which includes different categories, participatory evaluation, and theory-based evaluation. But for instance, last week I sent an offer in which there was a combination of process evaluation and theory-based evaluation, and some parts were also participatory. So it depends what you are doing. It depends on the assignment. And this is why I think evaluation is fun, because it's kind of like it's like between art and science. You have like certain things which make constraints, but then you can make choices and you can navigate, you can do stuff. You can have fun, actually. Yeah, I really like evaluation, to be very honest. So I'm slightly biased in this. So as you can see, this is one of the taxonomies. Mariana presented the evaluation tree. Here is another model of different kinds of models. So it depends on how you classify this. These are actor-oriented economical effectiveness models. But we are here with theoretical approaches. That's what we are doing here now. But to me, this is a slightly weird way of classifying it, but people do this. But yeah, there's a lot of literature on this, but the main differentiating point, I think, and this is important. Okay, when the slide wants to change. So this is very, very important. And this is something I've been also like teaching to some clients, and I always talk about this. Because a lot of the times the clients ask questions like, to what extent did X cause Y? In a context where you cannot measure it. So for example, to what extent did the presentation affect the income of Georgian evaluation companies? And it's like, you can't do this. So in the this kind of experimental setting, this kind of quantitative evaluation, which a lot of it is based on the idea of like natural sciences, or like if you think about medical research, that's what they would really like to do, is that there's a control group and a treatment group. And in those cases, you can use attribution. So measure X causes the change. So if I get ibuprofen, my headache will go away. And that's it. And you can evaluate it through quantitative methods. So we can give, all of us get a headache from drinking too much coffee, and then only this part of the group will get the painkiller and the other one will not. And then we can compare. Except for that, I think our control group is too small. But the problem with these is that you need so many, you need so many observations that it's typically below 1,000 observation, it makes no sense. So you need a lot of data because a lot of the quantitative methods, they're actually quite wasteful with data. because you have to make the control group. So for example, here we have an international group. So they would need to find some kind of controls for people of same age, same background, same height, weight, and same kind, same kind of living habits. And yeah, that would reduce the number quite small. So even from like 10,000, it could be that you only end up with 600 cases, depending on what kind of methods you use. So, so in things like employment policy, where the unit of observation is a person, that's quite easy. Youth policy depends on what level the data was gathered. I think Erasmus Plus, by now there are millions and millions of students who have gone on Erasmus exchange, for example, or participated in Erasmus projects. So they're fine. But for example, in local development, Finland, we have 52 local development groups. And if you want to compare them, you can't do anything quantitative. All of them fund about 100 projects, so about 5,200, possibly, but not necessarily. So then we work a lot with the contribution. So that, how does the measure contribute to the change? That's the thing. As you see here, this is that one X which causes the change. And here, our X is one out of many. And this is when the things get messy, but also interesting. So in a qualitative world, we are looking at the contribution. Also in the theory-based world, we are looking at the contribution. And another very interesting thing, we start getting into this kind of philosophy of science a bit, of like how do you, what's the ontology of the information, and I wanted to show you this because we are talking about contribution analysis later on. So there are different ways of thinking about causation. So as I said, this is the one where it's the attribution, so counterfactual causation. That counterfactual is always like that you think that what would have happened without the intervention? So it's a kind of imaginary world that you think about. In real life, this is a bit difficult. The only one where I think about social policies that you can actually do this with is with the Finnish universal income pilot. I'm not completely sure how I feel about that, but even though I'm a Finn. But what they did was basically, that there were people who received benefits, and then they did a lottery of these people, and provided them with an opportunity of, instead of applying for, let's say, unemployment benefit, child benefit, housing benefit, and invalidity benefit, to get one universal income. So that they would get a certain sum every month without having to handle all of these things. And they did a pilot, so they actually researched this. But yeah, they did a lottery so that they could find out who, and they had a large enough N so that they could actually do research on it. And then they created a control group of people with same kinds of benefits and attributes who did not get it. And for a couple of years, they did the pilot, and then they evaluated the outcomes. So like what actually happened if you do this. But so this is one of the rare cases where you do this, because you can't really do this. It's not very moral, for example, doing a lottery of who gets child benefits, and then we see what happens, or who gets unemployment benefits, and then yeah, it would be interesting to see what happens. So you don't really do this very often. But yeah, so that was a rare case in our policy fields. So yeah, so we have to know it, but we don't. At least I don't work with it a lot. Then there's the generative causation, which is interesting because there's the causal mechanisms are thought to be interesting, and that the causal outcomes, they follow from the mechanisms which act in context. This is also what Mariana was speaking about earlier, that you can't take the actions out of the context and the change happens within a certain context. This is this is quite much the base of well, this is behind the idea of theory of change quite much. Then there's this thing called, I think you call it Ainus causation, and it comes from the words insufficient but necessary part of a condition which itself is unnecessary but sufficient for the results. Oh, I can hear my methods professor talking about this for years, but basically it goes one step further from the generative causation, because you say that it's not only one cause, but there's an interaction between different causes. And by itself, one cause is not enough, that you need it, but it's not enough to cause the change by itself. So let's say that in our coffee drinking example, let's say that getting the painkiller would not be sufficient, but we would also have to drink enough water. So that would be a good enough causation, that the people who drink only water, no change, and people who only get the painkiller, no change. So this is interesting because, but as you can see, it gets more and more complex. And then there's the probabilistic causation, thinking that, well, there are some causes that increase the probability of the effects, but they don't necessarily cause it. That most probably if you take the painkiller, you will feel better, but not sure. That most people would, but not necessarily you. So this is kind of like a Bayesian idea of the causation. But as you can see, they operate a bit differently. And then that also means then that the way that you model them and the way that you research them are slightly different. But mainly, the way that you prove that you are right is different. Because here you only need to prove that the change happens in comparison to something that didn't, like that somebody who didn't get the medicine, that the other ones are feeling better. And here it would be the like different steps, and here there would be the like different causes making the change, and you have to prove that both of them exist or all of them exist. And here you think in terms of probabilities. So basically this comes then to the strength of your evidence. And that's what, the contribution analysis, you have to assess the strength of your evidence, and then you have to go back if it wasn't strong enough. But tomorrow I will talk about process tracing, and there the strength of the evidence is even stronger, like as an idea. And for a researcher, this I think makes a difference. You know, like usually we just, we make a plan, we gather the data, and then we're happy when it's done. But with the theory-based evaluations, you have to stop and then think like, oh, is this strong enough? Like, no, if it's not strong enough, I have to go back and start do more work. That can I, do I believe myself what I have just written? That do I have the proof that this is actually the right, this is the way that it went? And if not, then yeah, I don't know if you've seen the TV series The Lost, where they stranded on the island. I remember we stopped watching that with my husband when it one season they was like, Kate, we have to go back. And it's like, no. It's like, you don't go back to the desert islands once you're out of there. But in theory-based evaluation, you have to already think about it, that you will end up doing it, so better count on it. And one more. So this is, we already got here. Yeah, sometimes I speak so much that I actually, I go past my own slides. So as you see, these are the kind of models, the way that, at least in my head, they go. So in the counterfactual, in the quantitative evaluation, you are thinking about, what is the change? That these are the guys who didn't receive any money, and these are the guys who did. And what is the change in euro for their income? The theory-based evaluation, I kind of like it because the way that I see it is that I create a model from the program, and then we go out in the field to see if it actually looks the same or if it doesn't. So it's a bit like an architect who designs a building, has a fantastic idea, then lets the building company and the builders do their work. Then they go back and like, what happened here? Why is this window here? And what is here? I mean, we live in a new flat. I think the architect would cry because they forgot on that kind of wall, they forgot to put electricity. They only found out 2 months later when the flat was ready, when the guys were coming to install the electrical blinds. And it's like, well, where do I connect it? It's like, I don't know. It's like, have a look in the drawings. And then they are like, oh, according to the drawings, the electricity should go here, but it wasn't there. So there, we could see that the theory was a bit different from the practice. And that's what we are trying to find out with the theory of change and the theoretical models. And then there was this eliminating alternative explanations. This is especially the process tracing. That if we are looking at the change, let's say that we are looking at something here, then was it this one that caused the change or that one? And we have to figure it out. And okay, a couple of more of these things. As I said, these are like the approaches and methods. This is my personal understanding, but I think I might have to update this a bit. But we are here in this corner. Mariana was talking about realist evaluation as well as QCA, contribution analysis, process tracing. So we are in this corner. I don't really like this idea that the interview, I mean, to me, this is a data collection method. It's not an evaluation method, in a sense, a survey. But yeah, you see that from this picture, you see that there's actually a lot of quantitative methods, especially quasi-experimental. This is now quite big, especially in regional development, rural development. I think these are the basic ones. This is a big one at the moment. And generalized propensity score matching. This is also what they do a lot now. Yeah, the synthetic control. This is quite interesting. They make, for example, in Finland, some of my old colleagues, what they do is that when they evaluate like municipalities, and they make an imagined municipality who is like the average municipality from statistics. And then they compare the others to the imaginary municipality. But they make that's why it's synthetic control, because it's made synthetically. But yeah, so this is used quite a lot. And then one more of these things, I will confuse you totally with all of these models. This is actually this Magenta book. This is one of the big Bibles of evaluation, the HM Treasury, UK government. What I like about this is that what they say actually is that a synthesis of existing evidence and consideration of the theory of change should underpin the evaluation design for all of them, not only theory-based models. So that even if you're doing quantitative evaluation, you should actually make a theory of change. Because how else would you understand how the thing works? How else would you operationalize the evaluation? But yeah, so here we are with the theory-based evaluation. But yeah, so what I like about this picture is it has so much information. So that they say, define rationale of the intervention, identify the purpose of evaluation and the types of evaluation required, define the questions, agree on the approaches, choose the evaluation methods, collect, review, and synthesize data. So everything actually, it ends up with synthesizing data and collecting data, but just a bit differently. Okay, I look at 16 slides in, and I'm getting to my topic. But anyway, yay! Quite good. They say that Finns don't speak a lot. So they say, we are very silent, and, we go like, let's go to sauna. But no, not me. No, not true for everybody. No. When I grew up, I always felt like I was really weird because I was kind of a bit lively and, spoke a lot. Then I moved to Italy, and then I was really like, I was the quiet one, yes, and the introvert there. So yeah, then I realized that it wasn't me, it was my surroundings. But but anyway, so it's all relative. It is true. I mean, I think they say that there are places where you will feel more home than other places. But I think now I'm back in Finland and it's not so bad anymore. Or maybe I just don't care. So contribution analysis. This has started John Main from Canada. He is like he was the big name. He passed away a couple of years ago. A lot of the writings on contribution analysis are done by John Main. There's in the reading list, you will see there's Main. But he really thought about this a lot and he wrote a lot. So the idea is that, it is a theory-based evaluation method, of course, since this is what we are here for, but it's good for complex interventions, and it works with the attribution. So what is the likelihood that this thing has contributed to the change? No, not attribution, but contribution. Yes. No, I'm making a mess. So so it really works with which one of all of these facts, if this is one of the factors, did it affect the outcome, or was it something else? And the thing that makes it interesting and useful is that it's a systematic approach, because I think this is important, because a lot of the times, qualitative evaluation especially is thought to be useless because it's not really transparent and it's not really clear what are the decisions based on, and sort of what did you do to get to the conclusion that is this your opinion or whatever. But this one, it makes it very systematic, and then you You start with the questions, theory of change, gather evidence. Then you write a story, and then seek out additional evidence. You go back to see that if it wasn't strong enough, you go back. Oh, and then you can do this, revise and strengthen the contribution claim. And actually, you can do the steps 5 and 6 quite many times. So unless your deadline is approaching, you might be in quite a loop for a while. Or unless your project manager tells you to stop and start actually writing. But yeah, it does this systematically. And this is what makes it robust. Because if it's done well, then it's actually very credible and it does add a lot of value. And the good things about the contribution analysis are that, it can prove causality when the settings are very complex. It can also demonstrate a credible contribution to outcomes when you can't actually have attribution or it's not suitable. It doesn't work with only one factor, but it can actually include a lot of change factors. The methods are free. It doesn't prescribe methods. It just says that find evidence. So there is room for maneuver. And it is, and I like this one. I think this is the part that I like the most, that is structured but flexible. So that you can design it, or you can use this in different cases. You can use it with different methods. You can you can work with the idea, because the main thing that it gives you is the kind of steps that steps that you're following, but the steps are related to the what are you asking, what's the theory of change, and how do you prove the change of this, how do you prove the change? And then you're testing the theory of change. Did it really work this way? And then we come to the discussing with the client and other ways. But it doesn't bind you in extreme ways. But under any circumstances, should you try to answer questions related to efficiency or net impact, which are the attribution questions. You cannot answer them. Okay, so I was first praising the thing. This was like the sandwich, model. I say, what was good about it. Now I say what's not good about it. It's time-consuming, resource-intensive. And this is the part where I have found that sometimes because when you're writing an offer and you say that I would like to use this kind of method that you as a client don't know, but it's going to take a really long time and it's going to cost a lot of money. So how do I get the client to believe me that they would actually buy the thing from me and not from somebody else who says yeah, I'll do it. It's going to cost this much. So somehow it's somehow you need to make a good plan and think about the budget as well. But and then also, the resources that you need, they depend on the complexity of the theory of change. If you have multiple causations, if it's very messy and it's very complex, you would have to study all of the avenues. So then it might make sense to narrow down the questions. Of course, this would be ideal in framework, if you have a framework contract and you could then, you would have good relationship with the client and you could talk to them and say, hey, should we try this kind of a thing? And then, explain them about what they could benefit from it, and then they would say, okay, yeah, let's do this. But all in all, we have managed to sell this to, for example, Interreg managing authorities. I've done a couple of evaluations for indirect managing authorities using theory of change, and they were happy, because the interesting thing is that they were used to different kinds of evaluations, and when we did the theory of change or like contribution analysis evaluation, they got new kind of information that they wouldn't have gotten from the other evaluations. So it was actually valuable for them. But what we did notice, as I said already, that it does require significant input from the client in the beginning, because you need to talk to them about the intervention logic, the logic model, the theory of change, and so we, for example, we had to explain to the client like why we need to talk to them first, and why we actually want to interview their entire team first, instead of starting to collect data from outside. But yeah, they accepted it then, and they were actually very good, because they were involved in the programming as well. Then what we also found is that you need to write manuals for the team, especially if you are going, for example, through documents or doing interviews, or somebody is like coding something, or like document analysis. You might have, I don't know, 100 documents that you divide amongst 4 people. Then, for example, if you're looking for, whether through annual reports, whether they mention something about the assumptions that you have made or the risks, then you need to have very clear instructions that, what is it that you are looking for, and then when you start coding that, was it good or bad, then you need to have like inter-coder reliability, because, I say that, oh, this is rubbish, and Mariana says, oh, that was very good, and it's the same thing, then your evaluation is worth nothing. So within the team, you actually need to have this kind of really tough project manager and the good manuals, and also to agree also with the client to discuss that, what is the sufficient evidence that you would use that to say that you have done some hypothesis to say that this is how the theory of change would go, and that this causes the change. Then, at what point are you going to believe it? And what is sufficient evidence? That is it enough if one person says it in the interview? Do you need it from the monitoring data and at least half of the interviews? Or how are you going to decide what is good? And you need to also document the research, and this can be sometimes painful. So as you can see, all of this actually requires a lot of data. You have to be quite organized. So you can't really do good contribution analysis with like a bohemian attitude. And like, we'll end up there, So you need to be rigorous, because you need to be credible. When you start planning what kind of data you are going to collect, you need to also you need to go back to the theory of change. Quite often, when we start operationalizing the evaluation, we have the evaluation questions, and then we develop the judgment criteria, unless the client has already done this. The judgment criteria is like, let's say, like evaluation question would be like what are the employment let's say employment effects. They ask something about employment effects, or like, has the employment situation improved? Let's say like this. Then judgment criteria is like, what are we looking at? How do we, what is the concept? So you break down the concept, and then you set like, what would be good. And then you operationalize it by looking at like how would you, what kind of information and data would you collect for these kinds of things that we have, we have, that once we have unpacked the concept, that what are we looking at? Let's say, okay, now an easier one that I can actually think of is the diversification of local economy. Like, what does it mean? Does it mean that there are more people working in different sectors? Does it mean that there are new companies in new sectors that didn't exist before? Does it mean that the old companies are doing something new? Like what's our concept? So we need to like unpack the concept and then focus on collecting the data required to prove the concept. This is the way that we normally work. We go from the evaluation questions. But with the theory-based evaluation, you actually have to remember like, we have the theory of change as well. We have the risks, we have the assumptions. So somehow you have to also remember those when you are like operationalizing. So for example, you might ask about certain risks in the interviews, in the surveys, or in workshops or whatever. You might look at different data to see whether this change actually happened. You can look at the documents, whether people complained about this, that, or that. But you have to remember them. Then there's always this, the last one. The bad thing is that you might overestimate the, that. But this is, the usual case saying that, the Rural Development Fund was super important in creating jobs locally. That, because we got, let's say, 80 million euros, we created 100 jobs. And it's like, there was an economic, economic upbringing, that economy was doing really well at that point, and there was an injection of regional development money as well, or one of the local companies got a massive order from, let's say, Japan, and the fund had nothing to do with this. So, So we need to also think that it's not that we are not taking all of the credit for the intervention, but still, I still think this is a good method. The very special things about the contribution analysis is that, that it doesn't try to since it can't do attribution, but it's trying to make it quite certain that this contribution was linked to the changes by looking at the way that the change happened. And the interesting thing is that you start from the change, but you don't start from the intervention. Because if you start from the intervention, then you go like in the program logic. Then you are like assessing the program. But the contribution analysis assesses the change. That did the change actually happen? That's the main point. And how much of the change can we link to the program? Rather than going from the program saying that we will do this, we will do that, and then the change will happen. But then, like Mariana said in the morning, that you start from the end. That here is the change, and then, can we see that it's actually related to this? And also, I think this is also interesting, is that it doesn't believe that the interventions actually always work. It's not deterministic. It's considered that, well, it might work in some cases, might not work in others. There are different contexts, and then we will see if it actually did change. So in a way, it's more real than just saying that, because I do this, then in 5 years that will happen. because it's like, okay, if I do this, might be that in 5 years that will happen. And the way that you do this is that you organize it around you develop kind of hypotheses. Well, that's the theory of change. Then you test it, and then you update the original hypothesis according to the way that it actually went. We just finished the evaluation of the equality and equity effects of the Finnish Rural Development Program. This is possibly the most negative evaluation report I have ever written, but we had to write it nicely. But basically, I mean, the program they didn't have any objectives. They didn't have any measures. They didn't try to do anything about equality. And then the managing authority conducted. They wanted an evaluation to see, basically, like, did anything happen? Even if we didn't want to do anything. So they were interested in the unintended consequences. That was
There's
like
some ethical norms in the system which they can then what?
Yeah.
Attribute to it as
to the
outcomes.
No. We were very clear that all of this was unintended.
So throwing the stone in the dark and see if someone got hurt.
Yeah. So we ended up concluding that yes, the program was flexible enough that even though there were no objectives or no measures, it did produce some equality effects, but it did produce some changes. Unfortunately, not all of them were positive, because they had this kind of procedural idea of equality. So then we noticed that, well, actually the procedural equality does not necessarily mean positive gender effects or equality effects. The fact that everybody has the same right to apply doesn't mean that everybody actually has the same probability of getting support. That was the thing. But yes, they were positive effects as well. But yeah, so sometimes you end up researching the unintended consequences. But this was like super interesting and also a bit weird. And they actually took it pretty seriously. And they were saying that like, oh, we actually have to think about this much more. And we actually have to include some some objectives and some processes that actually ensure the equality and equity. That we can't just... And one of the problems was that, for example, the SWOT analysis, it was done at the very general level. They say, like rural areas lack jobs. They don't say what kind of jobs, who has jobs.
The analysis was not good.
The analysis was at this level, so of course the measures are at the same level. So they didn't actually get to the root cause. So then one of the recommendations is that when you're doing programming, go deeper and find out what the real problem is, so that you are able to address it. Actually, we gave a lot of recommendations related to the programming, but yeah. So sometimes, yeah, unintended consequences, they would come at the last stage. Actually, this is maybe a good place to stop now. Should we have maybe what time is it now?
It's 30 minutes to
15:47. Should we have maybe a 20-something minute break? Because then if we have a very long break, then we will drag in the... So yeah, so if we have a 20-minute break now, so then if we are faster, then we are free earlier.